be calm. Do you know how them bullets hit my son? What they did to his body as they hit his body?
Why did he stop Michael Brown?
Because they were walking down the middle of the street blocking traffic. That was it.
The pain and rage of one grieving family echoed and erupted. We had never seen anything like it.
You must leave the area.
What kind of weapon is that?
But we had seen the roots of that anger.
We should be able to drive without being harassed.
Mostly white cops busting mostly black and poor residents.
They treated me like a wild animal.
Community courts turned into debtor prisons.
I'm in jail because of some traffic tickets I had.
And the politicians who pushed all of it.
Mayor, you just want to ask you nothing on camera.
It's not funny. What?
Ferguson exploded over the death of Mike Brown.
Oh, I knew! Mike Brown!
But Ferguson's deep-rooted problems were only a small part of a widespread system of injustice that has poisoned our community for so long, many of us had learned to accept it. The deadly police shooting of Mike Brown and the reaction to it rocked our community and the nation. But this is not the story of what happened in Ferguson, though Ferguson is part of it. Ferguson did help expose why so many people are angry with law enforcement, and that's what we will examine tonight. This is a commercial-free, hour-long investigation of an injustice system carried out by cops, courts, and greedy politicians. Melvin Lands, a disabled ex-cop, was tasered and jailed over what he calls a misunderstanding with white police officers from Ferguson.
They went out of their ways to torture me and make my life as miserable as they could.
The incident ended with allegations of police brutality, mistreatment in jail, and a pile of tickets that cost Lands a bundle of cash, a case that was eventually amended to littering.
It totaled up to over $1,400.
$1,400?
Yes.
For littering?
For littering.
In a scathing report, the Department of Justice found a practice of abusive police behavior in Ferguson. It was fueled partly by greedy public officials who encouraged police to be more aggressive and issue more tickets that brought millions of dollars of revenue into the city. But News 4 Investigates found Ferguson was only a small part of a sweeping system of injustice being carried out throughout much of the St. Louis area. Our investigation also brought us to the North County city of Bellefontaine Neighbors.
We just want to ask you. I told you nothing on camera.
Mayor, we want to ask you some questions.
I told you nothing on camera.
But Mayor Robert Dorr refused to talk on camera about a police policy that critics say is indefensible and has hurt the relationship between cops and the community.
This is a Ferguson waiting to happen.
Well, I think it's unfair to the community.
As a Bellefontaine Neighbors officer for a decade, retired Corporal Joe St. Clair was ordered to carry out what he called a detailed quota system for tickets and arrests. If officers failed to meet their monthly mandated number, they could be fired.
I believe the chief put an illegal mandate on the officers, yes.
St. Clair gave us copies of a spreadsheet used by the Bellefontaine Neighbors Police Department. It identifies 7 different activities that officers are required to do. Those include writing ordinance violations, traffic arrests, uniform traffic tickets, parking violations, and traffic warnings. St. Clair had to do 50 of them every month. Did you and other officers feel like your pay was at risk if you didn't write enough tickets?
Well, of course. Progressive discipline eventually to suspension, demotion, and even termination.
If you didn't write enough tickets?
If you didn't write enough tickets.
And you believed that that could happen?
Yes.
St. Clair believed it because he received this letter from the police department threatening disciplinary action because he failed to meet the 50 minimum in September 2013. After getting that letter, St. Clair started writing more tickets and always met his quota.
I was not comfortable doing it. I had to do it. I have a wife and 2 children. I had to support.
In 2013, the year Joe St. Clair was reprimanded for not meeting his quota, Bellefontaine Neighbors Police wrote a record number of traffic tickets. In all, 5,332 citations, a rate of more than 1 for every 2 residents, and a stunning 114% increase in just 1 year. that he says made people afraid of the police and resent them.
This policy he had set in place, it weakened our relationship with the community. It really did.
You'd have to check in through here.
The self-initiated activities also brought the city a lot more cash. According to state records, Bell Fountain neighbors increased municipal court collections from $379,000 in 2007 to $1.3 million just 7 years later in fiscal year 2014.
We should be able to drive without being harassed.
We met Chantel Lockhart after she appeared in municipal court to respond to traffic tickets that were dismissed. We showed her the city's quota policy for officers, and she got even angrier.
Go out there and get some for real criminals.
It's absolutely unethical.
Tim Fitch retired last year as the St. Louis County Police Chief. He says quotas keep police focused on making numbers and protecting their jobs instead of protecting and serving the public.
A lot of the officers will tell you privately, I have to do this or else. But most of the time, the mayors and the police chiefs aren't stupid enough to put it in writing.
You don't feel like they can do their job as a police officer unless they meet these required minimums?
This is their job. This is what they swore an oath to do.
Robert Pruitt, then the Bell Fountain Neighbors police chief, defended the policy, calling it a well-rounded list of activities designed to encourage good policing.
Everything that's on this list and that's on here is part of a police officer's job. It's the totality of the job.
The Department of Justice investigation found that the Ferguson PD also used a quota system and that it unfairly impacted African Americans, who were far more likely than whites to be stopped, searched, and arrested.
Some officers even compete to see who can issue the largest number of citations during a single stop, a total that in at least one instance rose as high as 14.
I find it appalling that these guys can call themselves police officers.
Melvin Land says his nightmare with the Ferguson police began 4 years ago when he was sitting in his SUV at a mini-mart near the intersection of Harvey and Airport Roads. A police report said Land's wife tried to punch him and that he refused to cooperate with the cops, but Lands denies it. Instead, he says, he told the officer he had it under control and asked the cop why he needed to see Lands' license.
I just asked one single question, and because of that, for the next 3 days, my life was pure hell.
Police saw a gun in the car, prompting one officer to hit Lands. Then Lands says he was tasered 3 times, even though he never fought back.
While he was tasing me over my heart, he grabbed my arm and snatched me out on the ground. As soon as I hit the ground, another officer tased me in the stomach, and he tased me over my kidneys. And he held it on there for a while, and to the point I was just writhing in pain.
Then, facing 8 separate charges, including unlawful use of a weapon, failure to obey, and failure to wear a seatbelt, Land says he was taken to jail for 3 days and denied immediate access to his medicine. The city eventually agreed to plead the cases down to littering.
I think it's a way of basically them saying that they were wrong. And the charges that they had initially placed on me were trumped up. But they weren't going to go so far as to let me go completely. So they felt there's a way that they could still extract money out of me.
Ferguson city officials declined to discuss the case or the fines paid by Melvin Lands.
Only in America. Only in Ferguson, Missouri.
Our investigation also found police chiefs pressuring cops to write more tickets in other cities too, including Country Club Hills, which is right next to Ferguson. On this day, Major Michael Adler was accompanied by a second officer who helped him communicate with the driver that Adler had just pulled over, allowing the major to get credit for writing 3 tickets, but not requiring him to stand on his feet for long or repeatedly get out of his car.
She gave me 7 tickets at one time, and I had to hire an attorney to get out of that.
Outside Country Club Hills Municipal Court, Patrick Logan told us it cost him about $1,000 to pay off the citations that Adler gave him.
I'll go around, I'll go Jennings, I'll go through Ferguson, I'll go anywhere but through here. Because honestly, I'm just scared to get pulled over.
Stacking tickets for maximum fines is a common practice in some communities, including Country Club Hills. News 4 Investigates examined hundreds of pages of Country Club Hills municipal court records, finding that officers, and Adler in particular, routinely issued 5 or more citations per traffic stop. Example, if you were cited for failing to register your vehicle, there's a good chance Country Club Hills cops also ticketed you for related violations like operating an uninsured vehicle or not having a license plate. One citation might cost you $100 to $200 in fines and other court costs, but 4 or 5 tickets could easily reach $1,000.
I don't want to address that today.
Country Club Hills Police Chief Clifton Ware has pushed his cops to get more aggressive. In a May 2013 memo obtained by News 4 Investigates, the chief says some officers were ignoring what he called the issue of traffic productivity. The chief wrote, "For those of you who have chosen to and continue to ignore this issue, those officers, supervisors, and command officers will be reassigned to a vehicle that is not equipped with a computer, unless there's a dramatic and noticeable change in those officers' productivity."
I want to speak with our city attorney, like I told you. Then I'd get back with you. We can sit down and then I'll review whatever you might have.
But despite his promise to talk with us, the chief never responded to our repeated requests after we approached him that day.
Why wouldn't you comment on that?
When you want to sit down, we have time, I can go over the paperwork that you have. We'll do that.
Chief Ware's strategy worked. According to the Attorney General's Vehicle Stops Report, Country Club Hills increased traffic citations by 96% in 2013, the year the chief issued that memo. It was the second highest increase for a police department in St. Louis County that year, second only to Bellefontaine Neighbors. Country Club Hills, Bellefontaine Neighbors, and Ferguson are all mostly African American, and the overwhelming majority of people getting tickets are also black. But in Ladue, one of the wealthiest and widest suburbs in our region, critics say blacks were an even bigger target.
They knew that it was something that I wouldn't tolerate.
Larry White was the Ladue police chief from June 2007 to August 2009. He says then Mayor Irene Holmes encouraged him to harass blacks, but ignored DWI cases involving wealthy, white Ladue residents.
There was 4 blacks in the car, and the officers pulled them out, and she got very excited. That's what we want. That's what we want to see. Pull them out, get them handcuffed, and let their friends or their brothers, or I don't know what phrase she used, but so that others of those people can see what happens to blacks and that we don't want them here.
As chief, White cut the number of blacks stopped by police by 30%. He was fired after only 2 years. He sued for wrongful termination, but the case was dismissed. The city denied his allegations and in written statements insisted that the mayor never told him to target blacks or take it easy on drunk drivers.
Do you think these traffic stops, searches, and arrests are based mainly on race?
Of course.
Adolphus Pruitt, the president of the St. Louis City NAACP, helped negotiate a memorandum of understanding several years ago with the city of Ladue that he hoped would address the issue. But he believes the attempts failed because blacks are still being stopped in Ladue at a rate 16 times higher than whites.
We, both parties to that document, NAACP, City of Ladue, have failed to abate the cause, and that's why the outcomes are the same.
But News 4 Investigates' review of state records found there has been significant improvement in some respects. Example, the number of blacks stopped by Ladue police hit a peak in 2006 and since then has dropped 56%. The city insists it tracks police encounters in detail and analyzes them to prevent the possibility of racial profiling. Ladue officials say the state's system for evaluating vehicle stops is unfair because the city has less than a 1% black population and a busy interstate running through it. And that makes it much more likely that there will be a higher difference in the city's stop, search, and arrest rates of African Americans. The NAACP identified 8 communities where blacks are far more likely to be pulled over, searched, and arrested. They are Ladue, Brentwood, Clayton, Frontenac, Olivet, Richmond Heights, Town and Country, and Creve Coeur.
So this lane here is a designated right turn lane.
Creve Coeur is the only one that allowed us to ride along and see how officers do their jobs under a new policy that de-emphasizes writing tickets and focuses more attention on safety.
Looking for George for 16 on a black Altima. What address are you looking for?
During this stop, Officer Corey Mueller entered key information about the driver, location, and reason for the stop into a computer that stores it and eventually puts it into the annual report published by the Attorney General's office.
Have a good day.
In the Attorney General's 2014 Vehicle Stops Report, blacks driving in Creve Coeur were listed as twice as likely as whites to be pulled over by police.
Why do you think blacks are more likely to be stopped in this community than whites?
You know, they've looked at the data, and I think when officers focus on hazardous moving violations, it's a lot more equal. But when we look at equipment violations and license violations, I think proportionally, that skews the data.
Creve Coeur Lieutenant John Roma says the department uses a computer system to track information on each officer and issues a monthly report on their actions, giving supervisors and command staff alerts if there's a red flag like possible racial profiling.
If their percentage was high for the month, then the supervisor will bring in the officer, and they'll meet with the officer and kind of discuss what may have been happening that month and why is the percentage high. And then if it happens again, then we may go to counseling and training as well.
Lieutenant Romas believes any measure that suggests Creve Coeur profiles drivers by race is unfair and doesn't consider the more than 300,000 motorists driving through the city of 15,000 residents that has a black population of just 6%, a factor that he believes greatly increases the chance that Creve Coeur police will pull over black drivers and drive up the traffic stops to a point that no longer reflects the city's population.
To base everything on our population really isn't a fair measure of what reality is.
But local civil rights activists say the racist reputation of some departments has been fueled by their behavior. You see it in this Bell Fountain neighbor's traffic stop. The officer who pulled over the car says it happened about 5 years ago.
Okay, I'm gonna be right back with you, all right?
He pulled over a black woman driving a rental car. The officer was joined by a higher-ranking cop. Both of them are white.
It's the wrong car.
The woman's car came up as stolen in a police database, but the first officer confirmed it wasn't stolen and let her go. She headed north. No crime, no report needed, or in police terms, NRN. But the cop seen in the video says the higher-ranked officer had a different way of describing NRN. He called it N-word, running north. Seconds later, there was laughter. David McGrary was the first officer on the scene that night.
What was your reaction?
Shocked at first. I couldn't believe that it was being said. For one, there was no need for it.
He was your boss?
Yes. Yes, he was.
Does that make it a little more complicated?
Yes. Yes, it did.
Did you say anything to him at the time?
Not to him, no, I didn't.
So what did you do after that?
At the end of the shift, I had downloaded the video card and advised my immediate supervisor as to what had happened, and it was laughed about. So at the end of the day, I went home.
Nothing happened?
Nothing happened.
It wasn't considered a big deal?
No, not at all.
McGrary was a Bell Fountain Neighbors cop for 16 years, finally retiring in 2013.
Were you surprised that it wasn't considered a big deal?
No. No, it wasn't.
Why not?
Things like that just had a tendency of going away.
Those videos speak to not just a pattern, but a culture that exists in the Bellefontaine Police Department that has existed for a very long time.
Reverend Philip Duvall has filed 2 complaints against Bellefontaine Neighbors Police with the Department of Justice. The first was more than a decade ago, following repeated racist incidents against a black St. Louis firefighter who lived in Bellefontaine Neighbors, and the police department's refusal to take those crimes seriously. At the time, the police department was all white. Then it hired Joe St. Clair.
Initially, it was great. I enjoyed working there.
But that changed. Several months ago, Duvall filed his second complaint with the Department of Justice. This time, it was based on the revelations of Joe St. Clair, prompting a series of meetings with federal officials. Now, the police department is once again all white, enforcing the law in a city that's 70% black.
I think it's sad. I think it's really sad.
In response to our investigation, Bellefontaine Neighbors ended its quota system and no longer employs the cop who used the N-word during that traffic stop. Up next, I'll look at heavy-handed municipal courts and the impact they're having on our community.
I'm in jail because of some traffic tickets I had.
St. Louis County has 81 municipal courts. Even municipalities smaller than some subdivisions have police and courts. Some of them are notorious for being heavy-handed, even when it comes to the most minor infractions on the books.
I was kind of like, what's going on here?
Nicholas Durrell had never been arrested.
I was unaware of what the process would even be.
But he soon learned, getting cuffed and jailed, not once, but twice, because he failed to appear in Florissant Municipal Court to pay a $10 ticket for not wearing his seatbelt.
If it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't believe it.
But the more we investigated our local municipal courts, the easier it was to believe that Nick Durrell was just one example of a badly broken system, a system where even small amounts of cash seem more important to cities than treating people with respect and fairness.
Have you played?
Our investigation of local municipal courts began in Ferguson, a month after the police shooting of Mike Brown.
Right now, you've got all these housing charges.
There are 81 municipal court divisions in the St. Louis County Circuit, by far the biggest concentration of local courts in the state. A study by the nonprofit group Better Together found that in 1 out of 6 of those cities, the municipal court was also the biggest source of revenue. The St. Anne Police Department has mastered the art of enforcing traffic laws, using it to raise millions of dollars for the city, but with minimal impact on city residents. Last year, St. Anne Police say they issued 7,898 tickets on this small stretch of highway near Lambert Airport. That's an average of nearly 1 ticket every hour, every day of the year.
That means to me that there are more speeders.
Aaron Jimenez is the St. Anne police chief.
There are law enforcement officials and politicians alike who have portrayed St. Anne as running the biggest speed trap in the St. Louis region. Are you guys running a speed trap?
I believe we're not running a speed trap.
In 2009, after a series of deadly crashes, this part of the interstate was classified as a travel safe zone by MoDOT. State and county police and officers from 8 municipalities, including St. Anne, beefed up their presence. The number of traffic crashes dropped by 83%.
What does that tell you, Chief?
That the traffic enforcement definitely helped, 100%. Because it slowed people down. You know, people they don't want traffic tickets.
St. Anne police also took much of their ticket writing from city streets to the highway. In 2009, St. Anne stopped 10 times more vehicles on city streets than on I-70. Last year, the number of vehicles pulled over by St. Anne cops on I-70 was more than double the stops on city streets. That pushes much of the financial burden of St. Anne traffic tickets on drive-by visitors, not residents. Though Jimenez, one of the few elected police chiefs around, insists he's not playing politics.
We want people to slow down. We want people to obey the law.
That strategy has also helped more than quadruple the fines and fees collected in St. Anne Municipal Court during the last 7 years, eventually climbing to $3.2 million last year alone. That represents about 30% of the St. Anne budget.
I'm not hiding the fact that how much ever money we do bring in, that it doesn't help. I mean, I know it helps. It helps for giving the officers overtime, for them working the detail, also to have those reserve officers where they're not getting paid, but if they go up there to do the detail, they get paid the 15 to 17 hours, dollars an hour to do that. So that's a benefit.
Do your officers get any incentive to write more tickets?
Absolutely not.
But the officers working the interstate detail are competing for jobs. Jimenez says the last 19 cops hired by the department were reserves, and nearly all of the officers working on this detail are reserves. Last year, St. Anne wrote 60% more tickets on the highway, even though Jimenez says they spent less time there.
I want the public to know that I'm going to continue to be proactive.
When you get a ticket, you also receive a court date. A federal lawsuit was filed recently against St. Anne's Municipal Court because it allegedly violated the rights of poor defendants by throwing them in jail because they couldn't pay small bonds.
If I miss this court date, I'm going to have a warrant, period. That's what they said to me.
We met Susan Warren outside St. Anne Municipal Court. The day before court, she had gastric bypass surgery and still wore her plastic hospital bracelet. She checked out of the hospital early because she says a clerk told her she would be arrested for failing to appear for her first court date.
I just felt that was so cruel because I was speeding in your city. I have to leave a hospital where I'm having surgery because you would not give me another court date.
St. Anne's Municipal Court clerk insisted no one there would have told her that, adding that the judge doesn't issue warrants for failing to appear in court the first time. Miscommunication is a common problem with municipal courts, where you often can't reach someone who can answer questions or is willing to search for records. The records of only a few municipal courts are available online.
$75 plus cost, okay.
Our investigation also found a deep racial divide in courts. The overwhelming majority of municipal courts in St. Louis County have white judges and prosecutors. In Ferguson last October, all 17 employees working at the municipal court were white. 90% of the defendants were black.
Well, I think it sends a bad signal. I agree with you totally on that.
At the time, Ron Brockmeyer was the Ferguson municipal judge.
We do have black officers that are in our court. There's just none in there today. And we used to have a black clerk, but she became a black officer. So we did have a black clerk who used to sit up there, but she's now a black officer. You need to contact him, tell him you were here and it was continued.
LaRon Sladen was in court that day for a traffic ticket.
It's a very strong first impression.
Yeah, it is. I don't really want to touch on that subject, but no, I don't want to talk about that.
Do people in the community talk much about it?
Of course. I mean, every day.
Just 2 weeks ago in Ladue, a city with a population that's less than 1% black, there were 30 African American defendants in court. They represented 45% of the defendants. In a text message that night, Ladue PR representative Susan Ryan wrote, quote, "I'm sure you wouldn't want to do a story that makes it look like only African Americans go to court in Ladue, when there was clearly a balance of people in there. But do 30 black defendants and 36 white defendants really represent balance in a city that's less than 1% black?" Trying to talk to the Ladue police chief. We made repeated attempts to interview Ladue Police Chief Rich Wooten on camera about what the city perceives as balance, but he declined. Instead, we got emails and a statement emphasizing how Ladue doesn't condone racial profiling and has a system in place to track the actions of officers and ensure that people are treated fairly.
Alarm 2631 Lyndhurst. 2631 Lyndhurst.
Our investigation also brought us to Bell Ridge.
Yeah, we have a lot of calls for service down here.
Bell Ridge is a village in North St. Louis County, population about 2,000. 80% of the residents are black, but only one of the police department's 23 officers is African American, and she's part-time and doesn't patrol the streets.
The last application round I had no black applicants. And I can't hire them if I'm not getting them.
But law enforcement sources say the insensitivity and general practices of Bell Ridge police have discouraged blacks from applying. Example, Bell Ridge cut back on a highway speed trap 4 years ago and started handing out more tickets on city streets, which wound up tripling the number of blacks stopped by police since the change in strategy, further alienating the relationship between police and African American residents. During the same period, the number of white drivers stopped by police remained almost the same.
I think there are people who would look at these numbers and suggest that the Bell Ridge Police Department is targeting blacks.
I don't believe that we target blacks.
They stereotype everybody. And like I said, I stay in this area. I get pulled over sometimes for little to nothing.
Robert Kelly says part of the problem is the overwhelmingly white police force is being pushed to bring more money out of a poor black community.
It's a very deep-rooted problem, and it needs to change, man.
Did the police department ever get a request from the city council or the mayor asking to write more tickets?
No written request. I mean, again, a lot of small departments have to generate some revenue.
When we dug even deeper into Bell Ridge's records, we discovered something that appeared to surprise even the police. During a 3-year period from 2011 to 2013, Bell Ridge police claimed they never found a white motorist with any contraband. No drugs, no alcohol, no weapons, not once, out of 746 stops.
You'll agree that doesn't make any sense.
No, that does not make sense.
In its 2014 budget, Bell Ridge planned a cost of $101,000 for its municipal court. According to state court records, in fiscal year 2014, the Bell Ridge court raked in $513,000, about a third of the city's budget.
Why should courts make money?
Thomas Harvey is the executive director of Arch City Defenders, a nonprofit legal group that has documented the abuses of municipal courts for years.
Why should a municipal court be a profit center? It's okay if you want to recoup the money you pay out, actual court costs, to employ a judge and a prosecutor and a clerk and a bailiff, but why should a court be a place where we make money? In the state courts, any additional revenue is turned over to the state for education. It's only in our municipal courts where that additional revenue is left to the town.
This is 100 plus cost, okay?
During the last fiscal year, Missouri's municipal courts collected $153.3 million. It's unclear how much of that was profit. 2 years before Ferguson erupted and local cops and courts came under scrutiny like never before, Arch City Defenders began a court-watching program that found about half of St. Louis County's municipal courts had engaged in at least one practice that violated the U.S. Constitution. The legal defense group has filed numerous lawsuits against muni courts over civil rights violations and singled out Bell Ridge, Ferguson, and Florissant as chronic offenders.
The worst part of this has always been that people are going to jail over this.
Thomas Harvey calls it a calculated plan to prey on the most vulnerable people in our community.
We call it a debtor's prison system, right? I mean, it is a scheme designed by the leaders of this government, the leaders of the individual towns, the police, and the courts to imprison poor people.
In the Florissant case we uncovered, Nick Durrell was arrested on a 4-year-old warrant issued the same day he failed to appear in court to pay a $10 fine for not wearing his seatbelt. He paid a speeding ticket online, but he insisted there was no record of the seatbelt citation, so he didn't pay that one.
You thought you were done?
I was very much under the assumption that I was finished with it, yes.
Durrell said he didn't know about the warrant until a cop pulled him over in Maryland Heights 5 months ago for driving on expired plates.
The officer asked me to step out of the vehicle, told me to put my hands behind my back, I was under arrest, searched me.
He was taken to the Maryland Heights jail, where he waited more than 4 hours for Florissant police to come pick him up. After that, he was in Florissant police custody for an hour and a half, a total of 6 hours in handcuffs or jail.
It's a little surreal. It seems like a joke.
Florissant Municipal Court Judge Dan Boyle did not respond to repeated requests for a comment. Critics of the Muni court system say the threat of arrest has always been the muscle that squeezed the cash. Last summer, at the end of fiscal year 2014, St. Louis County's municipal courts had 437,000 active warrants.
I'm in jail because of some traffic tickets I had from way back.
Charles Lewis says he was picked up on warrants for failure to appear in court to pay traffic tickets in Cool Valley and Ferguson.
So how come you didn't pay them?
Because I didn't have no income then.
Some communities have stunning backlogs of arrest warrants that go back many years. Country Club Hills has nearly 35,000 active warrants, the equivalent of 27 for every resident, and nearly 20 times the rate of warrants in Ferguson.
It's absolutely insane.
Despite some reform and the promise of a fairer system, Harvey and other critics can still point to cases like Nick Durrell's, a case that seems so crazy. Even the friend who picked Durrell up at the Florissant jail urged him to take his court records to work so he could prove that it really happened.
He's like, you better take something to work, because when you tell them you were in jail for a $10 seatbelt violation, they're not going to believe you.
In response to our story about Nick Durrell, a half-dozen municipalities, including Florissant, changed their policy and no longer issue warrants for failure to appear on a seatbelt violation.
St. Louis County municipal courts are also working together like never before. Nearly all of them have agreed to the same fines and fees, giving hope that there could be a more uniform approach in how they operate. When we come back, News 4 investigates the greedy politicians behind the money grab.
That's kind of a veiled threat, isn't it? To write more tickets or you're not going to get your next pay raise?
The Department of Justice's investigation in Ferguson exposed the greed of public officials who used police and courts to raise revenue. But that isn't unique to Ferguson. In fact, some municipalities dig even deeper into the pockets of the people in their communities, and they are enabled by public officials who insist they have our best interest in mind.
At the car of a squad car, the moment his hands went up.
Anthony Gray seemed to be everywhere.
He should be in handcuffs.
As an attorney for Mike Brown's family, Gray received international attention, blasting the city of Ferguson and insisting that Officer Darren Wilson should be arrested for killing Brown.
We think at this point the grand jury should be scrapped, that charges should be issued.
But at the same time Gray was turning up the heat on Ferguson, he was also the director of public safety, commonly referred to as police chief, of nearby Pine Lawn, a small police department widely considered to be one of the worst in the St. Louis region.
We would like to talk with you.
Gray was in charge of the Pine Lawn PD for most of last year. His top commander was Steve Blakeney, a cop who has been accused of raping one woman, punching another, and was a frequent target of complaints filed by Pine Lawn residents.
Can't talk about Steve Blakeney.
How many times have you filed complaints against former Deputy Chief Steve Blakeney?
At least 12.
Carolyn Daugherty told me that she has been repeatedly harassed, ticketed, fined, and even jailed for minor traffic-related violations because Blakeney and the mayor disliked her brother. Like other residents who spoke to us off camera, Daugherty believes the police, especially under Blakeney's command, showed little interest in protecting and serving this small, impoverished community.
He took advantage of his position, I think.
But none of the issues raised about Blakeney seemed to bother the city of Pine Lawn enough to discipline him.
But as the police chief, you had to be aware of investigations that were going on involving alleged misconduct by Mr. Blakeney.
That's not true.
Blakeney has denied all of the allegations made against him. Sources say he was protected.
We don't have a quorum this evening.
By former Mayor Caldwell, who resigned recently after pleading guilty to extortion and attempted extortion charges. Blakeney's attorney implied that Pine Lawn fired Blakeney late last year because it became known that he cooperated in the federal investigation of the mayor. Caldwell and Blakeney both declined several requests for an interview.
You think that there are people who may be suing the city of Pine Lawn because of Mr. Blakeney's actions?
There's a potential of that. Okay. So I'd rather
refrain from making any comments about it. Don't put me on the spot like that.
Why didn't you? I got to put you on the spot because I haven't been able to talk to you before now.
Before becoming Pine Lawn's equivalent of a police chief, Gray was the city prosecutor, a critical role in the city's approach to collecting massive amounts of money through its municipal court. After running the police department, Gray became the prosecuting attorney again. During the last 2 fiscal years, Pine Lawn, a poor city of 3,200, collected $3.5 million in court fines and fees, almost half the city's general revenue.
Mr. Gray, do you believe that the city of Pine Lawn is collecting too much money through tickets and fines?
I have no comment about that. I don't know if they how much they're collecting.
Well, if you were going after the city of Ferguson so hard, why would you? I mean, Pine Lawn has a much worse reputation than Ferguson. Come on.
No, that's not true.
That's just 100+ costs.
The Department of Justice investigation of Ferguson's police department and municipal court documented how city officials used the cops and courts to drive revenue and even budget sizable increases in fines and fees. In March 2010, the city finance director wrote to Police Chief Jackson that unless ticket writing ramps up significantly before the end of the year, it will be hard to significantly raise collections by the end of the year. The chief responded by changing police officers' schedules and boosted tickets and revenue. A year later, after the chief reported to the city manager that court revenue beat our next biggest month in the last 4 years by over $17,000, the city manager responded, "Wonderful."
It is time for Ferguson's leaders to take immediate, wholesale, and structural corrective action.
Both the city manager and police chief resigned. Both declined to be interviewed about their communication.
$75+ cost.
The DOJ also singled out Ferguson Municipal Judge Ron Brockmeyer for his alleged heavy-handed approach in court. Brockmeyer was praised by city officials for significantly increasing court collections.
We're not looking to reach into their pocket. We're not looking to give everybody convictions. That's not the purpose of this court or any court.
Brockmeyer, who had repeatedly jailed people for not showing up in court to pay off minor traffic tickets, hadn't paid off his own past due taxes to the federal government. After that was revealed, he resigned.
Judge, can we just ask you a few quick questions?
But Brockmeyer wasn't alone. Officials in some communities have become so focused on increasing cash flow to their cities, they rarely, if ever, question the ethics or backgrounds of the key people who help them get the money.
Do you think you should have disclosed that information to Normandy and Wellston?
Well, I probably should have.
News 4 Investigates discovered that Charles Kirksey, the municipal court judge for Normandy and Wellston, was on probation after admitting to a pattern of misconduct as a private attorney by making 18 personal payments from a trust account established for his clients. The trust account had an overdraft of $1,193 for a payment for personal property taxes.
Do you think it hurts your credibility as a judge?
Only if you make it that kind of problem. And I don't think it is because it's something that had nothing to do with the courts. It's something that was particular to my practice, and I've straightened that out.
But Judge Kirksey still hadn't straightened out his other problem, his past due tax bills, and he had unsatisfied tax liens of $114,000 on his property.
And I let this get out of hand, but I'm working with the authorities to take care of it. That's all I can do.
As a municipal judge for more than a decade in Wellston and Normandy, Charles Kirksey had issued thousands of warrants for the arrest of people who failed to appear in court, often for traffic violations that involved small fines.
Were you aware that the judge is on probation?
No.
City officials claimed they didn't know that Judge Kirksey was on probation or that he owed back taxes.
Judge Brockmeyer took a lot of heat for unpaid taxes.
Mm-hmm.
You have unpaid taxes. You have a lien on your home.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this hurts the credibility of judges when they are sitting in judgment of other people for, in some cases, small amounts of money and issuing warrants for their arrest, like you've done?
Sure, but if I wasn't trying to take care of the problem, I would have to agree with you.
Following our report, Judge Kirksey resigned. News 4 Investigates has repeatedly documented the role of politicians in the cops and courts revenue machine. In Bellefontaine Neighbors, Mayor Robert Doar took credit for helping create a ticket quota system that was recently abolished by that city's interim police chief.
We just want to ask you,
Mayor Doar was proud of it, but not proud enough to defend it on camera. In Edmondson, a town of 800 residents near Lambert Airport, the mayor wrote police officers this memo and included it in envelopes containing their paychecks. The mayor's memo said that he'd noticed a marked downturn in traffic and other tickets and reminded them that the tickets you write do add to the revenue on which the police department is established and will directly affect pay adjustments at budget time.
That's kind of a veiled threat, isn't it, to write more tickets or you're not going to get your next pay raise?
Well, it wasn't intended that way.
But if you included it with the paycheck...
I was trying to motivate them to do their job and do it right.
To write more tickets?
Well, tickets are the only way that I can quantify their work. I use that as a point to wake them up, realize that, it does affect their pay. It really does.
Did it wake them up? Did they write more tickets?
I believe they did, yes.
Edmondson gets roughly a third of its revenue through municipal court.
You don't feel like you're picking on motorists to justify the size of the government that you have here in Edmondson?
Oh my goodness, no.
The mayor told me efforts to force cities to cut back on tickets as a way to pay for government are short-sighted and could plunge his community into a state of anarchy.
What's next? Don't write tickets or arrest someone for a house break-in? What's next? If go right down the line, pretty soon you have anarchy.
Perhaps more than any police chief in the St. Louis area, Aaron Jimenez of St. Anne is unlocking the profit potential of law enforcement. He's one of the few elected police chiefs in the region, which means he's also a politician.
I'm not hiding the fact that how much ever money we do bring in.
As an elected chief, Jimenez isn't accountable to the city council, the city manager, or the mayor. It's Jimenez who seems to be the driving force behind the dramatic increase in tickets his department is handing out on the highway.
Probably isn't anybody in this region that wants the program changed dramatically than and I'm working with the chief. It's his jurisdiction, his call. He's an elected chief, and I'll continue working with the chief, but it is his call.
Mayor Michael Corcoran says he would eventually like Chief Jimenez to eliminate the highway detail.
I think he's taken the appropriate steps to disband it appropriately in a timely manner.
Critics say St. Anne is using traffic tickets on the highway to make up for the loss of a mall that generated millions of dollars in tax revenue. Much of the mall closed in 2006. The final stores shut down in 2010. In response to the closure, the city made cuts and increased fines and fees. As a result of the heavy focus on highway traffic enforcement, drivers who live and vote in St. Anne are far less likely to get a ticket and a fine.
I'm going to issue a citation for the speeding.
During a recent session of municipal court, Arch City Defenders says 85% of the defendants lived outside of St. Anne.
I want the public to know that I'm going to continue to be proactive.
A day after that initial interview with the chief, he left for an extended education program. He has not responded to any of our follow-up questions. The money-driven cops and courts have kept some governments running, but barely.
I think it's crap. I'm innocent.
Pine Lawn.
Every time I turned in a complaint, they never received it.
Some residents say it's a community in crisis thanks to a greedy government that has failed them.
We don't have any law and order. Serve and protect, we don't have that. We protect ourselves and they serve us the tickets.
Politics has even dominated some of our attempts at reform, whether it's legislation or the Ferguson Commission. We begin with the Ferguson Commission, a group of 16 volunteer members chosen by the governor to provide a forum for the community, collect facts, and file a detailed report on the important issues exposed as a result of the unrest in Ferguson.
At times, the first few meetings of the Ferguson Commission seemed out of control. People yelled at St. Louis City Police Chief Sam Dotson during his presentation. Others screamed at the volunteer members of the commission. Following the anger and frustration, the commission was also criticized for how it spent money, hiring $125 an hour consultants without putting those contracts up for bid.
The important point is here that the commission had to get up and running quickly with folks who had proven expertise.
In addition, the Ferguson Commission hired Bethany Johnson-Jevois, one of its own members, to serve as executive director at a salary of $139,000. The commission has revealed minimal information on its website about how it spent money, including taxpayers' money. Documents obtained by News 4 Investigates show the commission spent tens of thousands of dollars in private money, preparing for and holding its first few meetings alone. But Mrs. Johnson-Jevois insists the commission takes disclosure and financial accountability seriously.
We have worked hard to ensure that the public understands everything that we're doing, including the financial picture.
I've not heard a word from the Ferguson Commission, and I represent Ferguson.
State Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal says she had 4 bills that were a direct response to issues resulting from the Ferguson unrest and were issues being explored by the commission. But she says commissioners never asked questions about them or offered support.
So I don't think that they've done their job.
Other critics told me the commission has failed to live up to high expectations.
What do you think of it?
Disappointed. Initially had a lot of positive hopes for it.
Reverend Philip Duvall, a longtime civil rights activist, applied for the commission but wasn't selected. He says one of the commission's biggest benefits will be the cushion it may provide for Governor Jay Nixon, who was widely criticized for decisions he made during the Ferguson protests.
There's political theater, something that speaks to the way the governor handled it or mishandled Ferguson. So it speaks to political theater to show to the rest of the world or the country that they're putting some type of effort to address it.
A lot of those things nobody agreed to, including the statements I made.
But the Ferguson Commission has engaged the community, and its staff and volunteers get their hands dirty and engage their minds in work sessions like this one.
People need to be able to sit in the courtroom even if they don't have a ticket.
In this one, they focused on municipal courts. Under the direction of members of the commission, volunteers who often line up on opposite sides are now working together to identify problems and try to find solutions.
I think what we're doing will have an impact.
Gabriel Gore is a St. Louis attorney and a volunteer member of the commission.
The goal here is to really put systems in place that will provide protections to all citizens in all municipal courts.
The commission and some of its volunteers are also taking credit for reform, primarily Senate Bill 5, the municipal court bill written by St. Louis County Senator Eric Schmidt.
I will tell you that Senate Bill 5, while it is not the ultimate solution, is progress, and that it would not have passed without the commission's advocacy.
For anyone in the Ferguson Commission to say that they are responsible for Senate Bill 5's passage, they're dead wrong.
I think the gravity and the enormity of this problem demanded a big solution.
Schmidt's bill is waiting for the governor to sign it into law. It requires sweeping changes. Within 3 years, municipalities would be required to have annual audits by a CPA and adequate levels of insurance. Within 6 years, all police departments would need to be accredited, a big challenge for many St. Louis County departments. The bill also would require courts to be more transparent and accessible. But the biggest change is the mandate to reduce the total revenue cities are allowed to collect from fines, bond forfeitures, and court costs for minor traffic violations. That would be reduced from 30% to as low as 12.5%, a sharp decrease that could have a dramatic impact on cities like Pine Lawn, which raises half its revenue from municipal court.
I think that if you get to the root of the problem here, which is revenue generation and what I've called taxation by citation or government by speed trap, we are going right after that issue squarely.
But Senate Bill 5 doesn't place a limit on revenue created through non-traffic cases like property code violations, which some municipalities use even more to drive revenue. After Kansas City and St. Louis, Ferguson ranks third among cities in the state in the number of non-traffic cases. Pine Lawn, with a population of just 3,200, is fourth, with 9,393 non-traffic cases just last fiscal year, a stunning ratio of 8 for every household in a community where 4 out of 10 people live in poverty.
SB 5 doesn't go far enough, as far as I'm concerned.
Thomas Harvey is the executive director of the nonprofit legal group Arch City Defenders.
The danger of some of the talk of reform is that I fear this community is going to believe we're done.
The Ferguson Commission is far from done.
That's readily doable. That's a question of funding and available resources.
With nearly $1 million budget and a mixture of support and criticism of its actions, the small staff and 16 volunteer commissioners must deliver a detailed report to the governor in September.
So defendants aren't informed about their rights and the procedures.
How far are we really willing to go?
That seems reasonable.
To do what's needed to help us heal.
There's enough blame to go around, so I don't know that it's helpful to point to one sector of people, but rather for all of us to say, what can we do going forward and what kind of commitments are we willing to make?
News 4 Investigates has spent much of this program documenting the failure of some cops, courts, and politicians, and the system of injustice fueled by their greed. There has been some reform, but more is needed. Example, Missouri needs a law banning ticket quotas for police. Last year, Illinois outlawed the practice. Missouri should also make written and implied quotas illegal. We should not allow municipal courts to make a profit. If we keep the current system of 81 municipal courts in St. Louis County, the courts should be able to recover their cost, but the excess should be placed in a fund under state control. That approach, or something similar, would eliminate the profit motive. There should be free public defenders provided for municipal courts. The key questions are, how will they be paid and who will pay them? The current system rewards people who can afford their own attorneys and punishes people who can't. That needs to change. There should also be a cap on the percentage of revenue cities are allowed to collect through non-traffic cases. Some municipalities actually issue more non-traffic citations than traffic tickets. There should be a limit, or the greedy politicians will be pushing for more fines for homeowners with tall grass and chipped paint. There should be limits on the roles for municipal court prosecutors and judges. Some of them, including former Ferguson Judge Ron Brockmeyer, were judges, prosecutors, and city attorneys in different communities, all at the same time. Some of them even act as defense attorneys in other communities, creating great potential for conflict of interest. Finally, all municipal courts should provide searchable court records online. Right now, only a few of the 81 municipal courts in St. Louis County have searchable records on CaseNet, the state court system website. They should all be on CaseNet. We know what the problems are. Now we must be willing to fix what has become the injustice system. For all of us at News 4, I'm Craig Cheatham. Thanks for watching.